Right.
Dustin, you want to introduce Audrey? And
Yeah, yeah. So Audrey is she works for PadSplit, I think over a year now, right?
Hmm.
Located South Florida. And then you've been in real estate though longer. Like you've been in a couple different roles. So but curious how you found PadSplit, what made you jump from one like
Yeah.
company industry to the next.
So I've been in real estate forever. I did mortgages for about 8 years, and I was living in California at the time and really wanted to get into tech. So prop tech seemed like the easiest transition. I started working for another startup. It was an Airbnb backed startup, but it was a marketplace similar to PadSplit. But we primarily focused on business travel, which did not exist during COVID. So I bet you can guess what happened to that company. And then I took the role with PadSplit because there's a huge demand for what we offer. It's mission driven, which I love, but it's also an opportunity and way for investors to cash flow on a single family asset, which is awesome. So love PadSplit. I'll be here as long as they'll have me. And have enjoyed working here the last year, have just been soaking up and learning everything. So excited to share some of that with you guys today.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it. So a lot of the questions will probably be more at least intermediate. There might be some newer questions, but I think a lot of people are familiar already
Okay.
with PadSplit. So I guess the first question for me at least, and anyone could chime in at any point, but what are some of the newer trends that you've seen evolving, like to help occupancy, longer tenant, like increasing length of time, stuff like that?
Okay. So there have started to be there are some other co-living companies that have started to pop up. Over the years, we've had like zero competition, but to be honest, I think it's great that we are starting to see some other companies because I think the biggest thing for PadSplit is just getting the word out that co-living is an option. And so we've made some really good hires for like brand awareness and things like that lately, which is super exciting. So really it's just about, you know, letting people know who we are and that there are options out there for affordable housing. When it comes to tenure, um, as our metros grow, we have like our standard basic things our guidelines that we require in the house: bed frame, mattress, light fixture, somewhere for them to store their clothes. And then we've always said, they bring what they need. So you set up the basics, the tenant brings what they need. However, as we've grown in these different metros, like in Tampa, we have 1,500 bedrooms. So a bed frame with a mattress doesn't quite cut it anymore. So what we've seen investors start to do is stage the beds, add things within the property that are within the room that kind of sets them up as if it's almost their own little apartment. In some of these bigger metros, like every room has a TV in it now. Every room has a desk. So setting the property up to ensure longer tenure is essential, I think. So, and if anyone's interested, I have a list of some suggestions on how to set up your rooms, and I can send you some listings that are seeing a lot of success and long tenures, just as some examples.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Um, have you seen the hurricanes impact? You've mentioned Tampa, so have you seen the hurricanes impact co-living at all in that area or that part of Florida?
Um, Tampa is a huge market for us. It does really well. I just checked yesterday. Actually, we're at about 97% occupancy. We had a lot of rooms book up after the hurricane. But unfortunately, we also had a lot of investors that had to extend their timeline because of obviously delays. But I wouldn't say that it has necessarily hurt us. It displaced a lot of people who ended up booking rooms.
Okay, cool. So this Zoom, it's gonna be recorded, so a lot of people are gonna watch this at some point. So this group is called it's Owners Club, a small subsection of Gator Sub 2.
Hmm.
And in it, everyone has this thing called an Everest, a 5-year goal.
Okay.
Um, I'd say probably a third, I could be wrong, but a third of the group are tied to co-living in some way. So 100 or so people, 130 people. and a lot of them are going to be looking to get their first one. What would you say are some like pro tips that you could give someone that they're going to get their first property, their first co-living in the next few months? What are some pro tips that could help make that smooth?
Um, so number one is follow the buy box. We got to ensure that this property is going to be a successful pad split. Number one is location and proximity to where people work, right? Stay within about 25 miles of the metro. We have our marketing efforts, our marketing dollars that we're spending are primarily focused within that metro, right? So if you buy a property outside the metro, you're probably not going to see the property lease up as fast, right? So that's number one, location and proximity. Is it close to where people are doing things, shopping, working? Next is pretty crucial, and that is proximity to public transportation. We ran some numbers or some data the other day, and we noticed that half of our tenants do not have a registered vehicle with us. So we have to assume that they are relying on public transportation to get to and from. So follow the buy box. Location, proximity to public transportation, parking is the other thing. You have to ensure that there's enough parking for your tenants. And if there's 6, 7 cars parked outside the driveway, are the neighbors going to get upset? That's another thing. We want to limit the red flags around your property. So ideally, what I like to do is I send you the buy box, you source properties, you send me any that you're considering for the platform, and then I'll get eyes on it and give you my feedback for PadSplit. So that's number one, follow the buy box. And then we say that we offer clean, safe, functional, affordable housing. If you look on Zillow right now for a room around $800 to $1,000, it doesn't exist. If it does, it's probably not very clean. It might not be very safe, likely not very functional. Also, if we're asking between 6 and 9 unrelated people to live in a property together, the property has to flow, right? We want to limit vacancy and turnover. And so we can do that by making sure people have their own space, they're not on top of each other, and the property flows well. So that would be my advice.
So let's say there's a property that someone on here, they're looking at the first one, they're looking at it, it's a sub two deal, like they're excited. When you look up the data on the zip code on PadSplit's dashboard, what, in your opinion, is the lowest amount of active units that that zip code or maybe a neighboring zip code should have? Is there like a rule of thumb that you suggest?
So actually that does not matter at all.
Okay.
I think if you look and there's no properties in that zip code, but it follows the buy box, go for it. Don't be afraid to be the first to dip your toe. As long as it follows the buy box, you're good. It doesn't matter if we have 300 units in that zip code or if we have 0. So yeah, and then also I don't love that data map because it factors in every single property. So you might see occupancy is a little lower than you were anticipating. That could be because we just onboarded 5 units there, 5 properties there, and they're getting leased up, right? So that drags down the occupancy. So if you have a deal you really like, send it to me. Let's dig in a little further so I can get you like some accurate numbers and give you my feedback on the property.
Okay. And what's the best way for people to do that? Is it Instagram or a certain email?
No, it's my email, audrey@padsplit.com.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a slide I can share with you, but ultimately email is the best route. I also have a phone number. It's on this slide as well, but I can make sure you get it after if you want to blast that out. Ideally, would like to send you my calendar link, set up a one-on-one with me, and we can kind of dive into your specific situation.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to show the slide briefly, so it's in the
Sure.
recording, and then I think Tracy has a question for you.
Hi, Audrey. I will be to my desk in a few minutes. I feel bad that I don't have my camera on,
No
but
worries.
I'll make everybody nauseous watching me walk. Um, so I do have a couple of questions, and thank you so much for being here. We are so appreciative
Of
of your
course.
time. Um, so a lot of questions I hear from people that are really open to location, right? So there, some people just say, "Oh, I only want to own something that, I can drive to, where other people, they're totally open. So for the people that are completely open and they don't care where they buy, what would you say is a tool for them to determine what the best metro area is? Because we know some have become a little oversaturated, and that's expected.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah,
there's actually not a metro that's not doing well, if I'm being honest. The demand for what we offer is like, it's through the roof. I mean, we are at about 90% occupancy across every metro, right? And so there's all sorts of factors of why people want to invest. You got the appreciation potential, things like that, right? So I can throw out a few that I like, which are Tampa. I like Orlando. I like Richmond, Virginia. We were at 100% occupancy across 250 bedrooms last month, right? So huge potential
wow,
there.
right.
I also like cities like Baltimore. If you know the area, that's a really good area to invest right now. Kansas City is becoming a big metro for us. Over on the
Okay.
West Coast, Phoenix has seen a lot of success. And then also Houston is a massive metro for us as well.
Okay. That's really helpful. If somebody wanted to check, just sort of see the vacancy rate, they can get an account with PadSplit as a potential landlord. And then
Yep,
they can peruse, am I right? They can kind of peruse the data for each metro area.
exactly. So we have this data map. It's basically our version of AirDNA.
All right.
So all of our data lives in here. You can basically zoom into the metro and it will tell you how many units we have across the metro. You can see we had 16,000 searches on our site in the last 30 days for rooms in Tampa. We run a bunch of internet marketing ads, and then we also list on 48 other third-party sites. So we're driving views to our website. This will give you the overall average. And then you can see here in Tampa, we're at 93% occupancy. On average, 7 days to get your first booking, 31 days to get to 80% occupancy. But if you zoom in, you can actually get deeper data by the zip code. So this will populate here in a second. All right, so in 33605, let's say you found a property here that you're interested in. You can see we have 85 other active bedrooms. Units are bedrooms at PadSplit. And then the room prices here are a little higher than the average. So you can underwrite it at these weekly room prices. And then 95% occupancy is amazing, especially across 85
Yeah.
units. That tells you right there that you could definitely acquire in 33605, and the property is likely going to be very successful as long as you follow the buy box.
Love that. Yeah, I love that you continue to remind people to follow the buy box.
Yep. And, I do that, and then guaranteed someone's going to send me a property in an HOA.
Of course.
A-rated neighborhood with zero parking. But yeah, after a few tries, we get it, and they end up buying something that works great. But yeah, it's definitely a joint effort at first.
I love that. I have a couple other questions. I don't see any other hands. If somebody has a question, just please jump in. Otherwise, I'll just keep going.
It's all you, Tracy. Floor
Okay,
is
let's
yours.
go.
Okay.
Can I ask
Can
just really quick while
oh yeah, please.
so Audrey, while you're sharing that, it says active units listed.
Mm-hmm.
Are those the number of bedrooms, or are those the number of okay.
Bedrooms.
Ooh, good question, David.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Bedrooms. Yep. So this app actually shows all of our metros. Not all of them are core metros. And a core metro, that means we have boots on the ground vendors. You mentioned a lot of investors want to acquire out of state. And so we make it easy in our core metros because we have boots on the ground vendors that can help you get the property from A to Z, right? Acquisition to listed on our site. We have 100 other metros outside of our core that we call PadSplit Anywhere. Those are smaller metros. Once we get to 100 units in those cities, they'll become core metros. But until then, we're not running marketing ads there. We don't have boots on the ground. So it's really a joint effort to get the property listed and leased up. So just keep that in mind. But when you click into the metro, it'll tell you if it's core or if it's PadSplit Anywhere. So just keep that in mind.
And PadSplit Anywhere is 100 rooms or 100
Rooms.
Okay. Okay. So Jacksonville, Florida, that would be considered a core market.
That's core. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So like that's what I think of when I think of oversaturation, right? I've followed the Jacksonville market for, I think since you've been in Jacksonville, really. And it's definitely has far less occupancy than it did. Obviously, that's, par for the course on some degree, but it seems like it's a little bit oversaturated. So how, as you're looking at this data,
Mm-hmm.
somebody then could come in if they're wanting to pick, I don't know where I'm going to go, I want to pick a place, they can pull this data, see what occupancy rates look like in all these different major metro areas, and then that would be a tool for them to help determine a less saturated area, maybe. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. And actually, Jacksonville's so nuanced because we had a
It is.
the zip codes on the east side do very well.
Yeah,
right? And then we
absolutely.
have some struggling zip codes over here on the west side.
Oh, 100%.
There's
Yep.
a huge reason for that. We had an institutional investor who acquired a ton of properties there when we first started. And they're not the nicest properties. They weren't managed the best.
That's not a great part of town.
It's not a great part of
Those
town.
3 zips.
But
Yeah.
there's a huge demand and need, I think, for PadSplit in these areas. But yes, those properties have drugged down the occupancy. That investor is actually like selling off a ton of these. So I think we're going to see a shift in these specific metros, or I'm sorry, zip codes. But yeah, there's certain areas, certain pockets of Jacks that are not doing well. And I would probably advise you for now to kind of steer clear of those, but there are so many that are doing well. So I still love Jacksonville for PadSplit. Just keep that in mind. But yeah, definitely use this map to determine, which ones are doing well and which ones aren't.
I love that. That you had mentioned something I hadn't even thought about. So before I go to my next question, can you help us understand? So I'll let you explain PadSplit Marketplace, but then the question is specifically the why, right? What does PadSplit own those? Like why?
So PadSplit Marketplace exists because there is a market for acquiring a PadSplit that's already converted. There's tenants in it. Some investors don't want to deal with the conversion, the staging. They just want to acquire a cash flowing asset, and they're willing to pay 10 to 15% premium on that asset for that reason, right? Yeah. Anyone can list on the marketplace, and a lot of investors do to see if they'll get any bites. But we're trying to actually get away from the marketplace and just have it kind of be its own thing, because we tend to spin our wheels a lot because those investors aren't actually interested in selling. So they sell for all sorts of reasons. We have a lot of investors that are, were flippers. And so they want to turn these over, get them ready. They think there's a market for selling these off, and there is. So I think there's all different reasons why people would list the property.
I love that. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll keep going unless, of course, if somebody has questions, just hop on in. I hear from a lot of people, one of the concerns is what happens if, so I buy this property, it doesn't cash flow as a long-term rental, but I know that once I get it into co-living, it's going to cash flow and it's going to be wonderful. But then they say, but what if it doesn't? So once a owner has a contract with PadSplit, if it turns out that they're just not making the revenue they need to cover the mortgage and expenses, what does that contract with you look like? When would they be able to walk away if they had to, and then, revamp it back to a single family?
Yeah, good question. So you sign an agreement with us. It's not a binding agreement. You can actually, if you list the property with us and decide 3 weeks later, this isn't for me, you can delist with no penalty. Yeah. So you're not locked into anything. We do have that agreement in place because through our legal strategy, it's required, but it's not binding. So you're not locked in.
Okay. That's terrific. And as far as the leases go, members are required to, I know this is kind of shifted a little. So maybe if you could talk about, I think people always want to know about what does it cost to be with PadSplit? What are the fees? And then I think a little bit about tenant turnover. Is it a week required? Is it a month? Can tenants decide if they want people to be, or pardon me, can landlords decide if they want people there for a
Yeah.
week or a month? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, let's start with the tenure. So we require a minimum 31-day stay.
Okay.
However, we can't hold people hostage, right? So they book the room sight unseen
Mm-hmm.
based on the photos. They get in the property and they decide co-living's not for me, right? I
Right. This
love
is,
the idea of only paying $800 a month, but I can't live with 6 other people I don't know.
yeah.
Fine. There's nothing we can do about that, right? So sometimes it takes a couple months to stabilize and get tenants in there that jive and that want to be there. And so just keep that in mind. However, once it does stabilize, ideally the rooms are turning twice a year. Average tenure in Florida
Wow.
is actually 8 months long, right? We promise views to your listing. We are going to drive views to your listing. Then it's up to the tenant to book based on a few things: location, proximity to where they work. How do you have the property set up? How many people are sharing a bathroom, right? Those all factor in, right? So
Yeah.
when you're acquiring, you really got to think about that stuff. Like put yourself in that person's situation. I think that goes a really long way. And if you do, people will stay. We have tenants that have stayed with us for 3 years. It's nuts, you know,
Wow.
and they go into it with the intention of only staying a few months. With that said, we've changed things a little bit because we do want to incentivize long-term stays. So we do ask people to, we ask them to commit to 3 months up front. If they don't, they pay $175.
Okay.
If they're new to PadSplit and you're their first booking, you get that $175. Okay. So basically we drive views to the listing, we push booking requests to you, and then you are provided all the information about the person, their history with evictions, things like that. Whether they committed to that 12 weeks, if they've ever lived in another PadSplit before, what their rating is, and then it's up to you to approve or deny that booking.
Okay.
Okay.
I like
So
that.
we just give you all the info and then you decide. So if someone has not committed to that 12 weeks and you ask them, hey, you know, what are your intentions? And they say, I need a place to stay for 30 days. That might not be a booking you want to approve.
Okay. Can you, I know I've had this question as well, is gosh, I'm worried about safety, right? I'm worried about a woman moving into a house with a bunch of men, or on the contrary, a man having to live with a whole bunch of women and sharing a couple bathrooms. But do you have the right, or is there some, concern that, gosh, I just want my house to be all women or all men? Can
Yeah.
you do it
Considering
that way?
you got to consider fair housing laws,
That's
right?
what I mean. Right. Okay. Okay. So
I guess we have to remember these people are adults. They kind of know what they're signing up for, right?
agreed.
The inexpensive room comes with some, things that you wouldn't
Yeah.
typically deal with, and
Right. Flexibilities.
they're willing to for the inexpensive room, right? So we just have to trust that they're going to be adults and they're going to follow the rules and respect each other. And if they don't, trust me, we hear about it in 5 minutes. So
I bet you do.
yeah.
That is a great other question that kind of leads me to, and again, guys, if you have questions, just don't even raise your
Yeah,
hand.
I,
Go,
I do
Tracy,
have
stop
something
talking.
around that actually.
Yes.
Before we go to a different topic,
Please. Yep. Love it.
it is that because you're like, yeah, PadSplit here's about it, but it's not actually PadSplit's responsibility, correct, to manage any tenant, like if there's conflict, if there's whatever, you're not property managing, you're not doing that element, correct?
Yeah, we do actually. It's kind of a joint effort. I'll be honest with you, right? There's no like one size fits all, right? Every scenario is different. We have methods that we follow. We actually have a whole team dedicated to kind of mitigating these things. And then we have processes in place around It's kind of like a 3 strikes you're out kind of method where it's like, we warn them. We ask them, we or you can ask them to transition to another room. Like book another room, which actually typically works if people aren't getting along. Or there's always the option to issue the notice to vacate. If we determine that someone's being disrespectful and they're not a good fit for the platform, we'll cancel their membership and we ask them to vacate within 48 hours.
Okay, that's very different than what I'd heard. I'd heard that PadSplit is not for property management, that they are the marketing vehicle, and that you would need a property manager.
So typically you're responsible as the investor for everything physical to the property. So we don't do anything physical. We market the property. We have the dashboard. We collect payments, we screen tenants, and then we have a team that's dedicated to like mitigating situations. But a lot of times the investor or the property manager is also involved.
So Audrey, I have a related question because I do have a PadSplit and I do have tenants bickering right now. So I'm replying to those emails. They're leaving things in the sink, whatever the issue is. So do I have an option to not do that?
Yeah, you can push them to support. Yeah, we have a whole support team dedicated to mitigating this stuff.
Okay, good to know. Because it's been interesting. I've had to send out house rules again, but again, that person might not be a good fit. I don't think they've lived with other people and they don't really
ask them, just say, hey, it doesn't seem like it's working out. I'm going to ask you to book a room elsewhere. Trust me, it works. It works often.
Okay, I'm gonna give them one shot and then we'll see how it goes. But I appreciate that. Kind of related, but cameras in the common areas. I hear that some people are putting cameras in the common areas. I don't feel comfortable doing that, but do you know the success rate and the longevity of how long people stay, cameras versus non-cameras? And then do you have more issues or less issues, or what that's looking like?
Yeah, so a lot of hosts are doing that. It's not like they're watching the footage 24/7, but it's like if something goes wrong, they can roll the tape and see kind of what happened. And I think it has been successful. As long as you put in the listing, hey, there's cameras, they're there for your safety. People tend to like them. It's also a good way to see if people are bringing guests over, things like that. But it's up to you. If it were me, I would at least put one on the exterior of the property.
I do have that. Yeah.
Who's coming and going. Yeah.
Can I keep going? I had 2 questions.
Melanie, go girl.
Non-furnished rooms. So I don't mind furnishing the rooms, but I just feel like PadSplit would explode if we had the option to also do non-furnished rooms. We have so many investors in this group be buying houses and just filling them with people in non-furnished rooms. Is just lower cost of entry. Is that on the table? Is it in discussion?
Such a good idea. I have not heard anything about that. I think when we think about like wear and tear on the property, it's actually a rule within the membership agreement that they will not bring exterior furniture in the house. So I don't know. I don't think PadSplit has it to where that's going to be an option anywhere near in the future, but I think that's a good idea. I'll actually pass that along and see if that's something we would ever consider.
Please do. I'm going to advocate on every call I'm on with PadSplit from now on.
I mean, I think we just had a competitor fold. And the reason they folded is because they took on everything, right? So they promised to manage the physical property. They were managing every aspect. They were furnishing the property themselves. We have kind of taken the approach that like, we're the marketplace. There's no one size fits all, right? And so we really want to give the investor the autonomy to manage this how they want. So I think maybe in the future, you will be able to list a property that's like, hey, I'm renting by the room, but you got to bring your own bed.
Yeah, and if we right now, like say you had a 7-bedroom house, but you wanted to leave 2 of those bedrooms unfurnished and sort those tenants yourself, you would just list it on PadSplit and just list the 5 bedrooms. Is that correct?
Every tenant would always have to be a member of PadSplit. For liability reasons, we will never allow PadSplit tenants to live with non-PadSplit tenants.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, that makes sense. Well, hopefully that comes in the future. That would be awesome. For the one more question. For the non-PadSplit markets, you talked about the PadSplit Anywhere. My property's in Coliving, so it's an emerging market. It filled up in 5 weeks. So I was very happy. I literally did no marketing on my own, and it was kind of
Killeen, Texas?
Killeen, Texas, yeah.
Okay.
Just somewhere around Austin. I'm in Canada, so it's the geography is irrelevant to me. But for the non-PadSplit market, so that wouldn't be Killeen, right? Killeen's emerging market. But let's say I wanted to have a PadSplit in Panama,
Yeah.
City Beach, whatever, Florida, down there. It's not your market. Can I still put it on the platform? And will you still push it to like those 80 like room
Yes.
sites? You will do that.
As long as Panama's part of PadSplit anywhere. So you still can't buy a property in like, oh, you know, Atchison, Kansas and put it on PadSplit. It's still got to be within the 100 metros outside of
Okay.
our core markets. But yes, we still listed on the 48 other third-party sites. That is one thing that we do. But we're not like running ads and things locally.
Okay, no, that's awesome. Okay, that's all my questions. Back to you, Tracy.
People are finding a lot of success with PadSplit anywhere. I will throw that out there.
How much
Yeah.
notice does someone have to give when they're ready to move out? How much notice do you get as the landlord?
I think it's a week. I think they need to put in a week's notice.
Ashley, or Audrey, I'm sorry, I have a question. Last I had talked to you guys, Seattle was not a market that you guys are in. They just recently, Seattle in December passed a law, or passed a law that they are allowing and now changing their zonings and stuff like that, so that
Yeah.
co-living is going to be able to be allowed more and are more palatable, I guess, in the area. They're encouraging it now because of the crisis. So is that an area that you intend to go into soon, or that could be something done with that and outside of even Seattle?
Yeah, we just launched Denver, Los Angeles. We launch a few markets a year, and then we wait for the others to become, with the 100 units, to become a core market. I don't know that Seattle's on the list to become a core market this year, but once it gets to 100 units, it will automatically become one. But I did hear that, and I've seen discussions about it in Slack. So it sounds like maybe it's top of mind.
When you say 100 units, so exactly how does that work? So like when it becomes 100 units, how does it become 100 units? I mean, just like listing on your...
So Seattle is a PadSplit anywhere metro.
Okay.
Meaning that we will take units on our
Okay.
marketplace. We're not spending marketing dollars in Seattle yet. We don't have boots on the ground vendors there. Once 100 PadSplit anywhere units are onboarded, it will become a core metro and we'll start to build that out.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
James, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I apologize if this has been answered already. I had to mute you guys for just a few minutes. But getting back to the furnished, non-furnished aspect of it, is there a minimum required furnishment for PadSplit? And do you mostly require like bed, dresser, TV? Is TV required? Is any kind of cable required or internet access required?
So the weekly room price that you set includes utilities, access to washer and dryer, and Wi-Fi. Okay. And then we do have guidelines that lay out what's required in each room. In the bedrooms, at minimum, it's a bed frame, a mattress. It needs lighting, ventilation, 2 modes of egress, case of emergency, and somewhere for them to hang or put away their clothes. Those are the minimum. Anything else you want to add, you can, not required.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I have a list that lays out what's required in each room, and then I have a corresponding spreadsheet that has a good, better, best option for each requirement with links on where to buy. Super seamless.
Perfect. And that's available where?
Reach out to me and I'll send it to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Audrey.
Absolutely.
Audrey, would you be okay sending that to me, and then I'll try and attach it to the Zoom like recording?
Yeah, I have like a step-by-step process if someone's interested in onboarding a property. So would love to chat with you about that first, and then I can send you the step-by-step list. But I do have just an attachment that kind of lays it out that I'm happy to send you.
And would you be okay if I attach it like with the recording of this call?
Oh yeah, sure.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll hop
Audrey,
back.
how would you just...
Oh, go on, Dustin.
Oh, sorry. Audrey, so let's say you have your scale of like performance, your hosts. So on one side are like best performers, they're rocking it, they're killing it. And then the other end is the hosts that are just like barely surviving. How would you describe the differences, like what they're doing, maybe how they're handling the properties, like what's separating the high performers versus the properties that are just really struggling?
So good question. Actually, we just had our sales summit in Atlanta last week, and they announced that we're going to roll out more education. So like webinar series, we're going to make our website a little more user-friendly for people that want to become PadSplit operators and understand like how to book, how to get your room booked, how to operate, best practices, things like that. But I think though, if I had to differentiate or like what are the successful people doing that the people that aren't seeing success aren't? I think it's just operations, right? I think people go into this thinking that they are just going to be able to sit back and collect a check. And if you don't put a property manager in place, you need to understand that there are some operational things that you're going to have to do. And so I think that's probably the biggest factor. I always suggest, unless you're already an operator and you don't have a full-time job and real estate is your full-time job, plug in a property manager. We have a property manager that charges $50 a month per room. I think it's worth every penny.
Yeah, and is that Florida or is that pretty across the map? You see that pricing?
He's pretty across the map, for the most part. He's not on the West Coast, cities, but they are trying to expand all over. We also have another property manager called Two Keys. They were an affiliate of PadSplit. They aren't any longer, but they charge like 6%, which probably averages out to be the same. And they're in most places as well.
Do they handle communication with PadSplit members as well, not just the physical part?
They do everything.
Awesome.
And if you acquire a property, they will furnish it for you, get it set up and stage, list it. So if you want to be completely hands off, we can make that happen, right? And so if you're not local to the property, no problem.
And you would
Those
have
two
pricing
keys.
Yeah, so I would basically just put you in communication with them. You can talk about the project and get kind of their pricing and scope of work.
I feel like I think sort of what you were saying, Audrey, is I think sometimes people think this is like a plug and play, but it really is no different. You're an investor, you own a rental property. You're either choosing to manage it yourself, deal with everything yourself, or you hire somebody to manage your property to deal with the roof is leaking, there's a plumbing thing, the neighbor just called and said, your tenants are having a party, or you get those calls, right?
Right.
And so I think, and typically I think that fee depends obviously on location, but on average it's 6 to 10%. So when I'm doing my underwriting for any property that I'm going to purchase, I always put into that, what is the cost of management? Even though I might say, oh, I'm going to manage this myself, I want to make sure if I change my mind in a year from now that the numbers still work. So I just like to point that out to people that it's not necessarily a plug and play, but you can put everything in place so that it is just like you could with a regular rental.
Exactly. If you decide at any time, this is too much, I didn't realize how, much effort I'm gonna have to put into this to manage it. We can plug in a property manager anytime. And all these property managers do is co-living, right? So PadSplit has become their bread and butter, and that's all they do.
I'm going to put Two Keys in here. I think James was asking.
Yeah, PMI is the one that's $50 a room. Anyone in Florida, I highly suggest using Fred. He's super thorough. And you'll still have a bird's eye view into how they're managing because you have access to the dashboard. You're just not going to be in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
is Fred the one where him and his wife also will help do? Yeah, they're outstanding. So if you're they're just in Jacksonville, or
No, they're all over Florida. They manage about 500 PadSplits all over Florida.
Okay.
They're up into Atlanta. I saw recently they're like all the way to Baltimore. So they're hiring.
Oh my gosh.
Teams. Yeah. Yeah.
They've expanded a lot.
Yeah.
Last year, I think when we met them, what I loved is, they will come, they have different options for furnishing. So you can call them up and say, help me out. I'm buying this pad split. I want to go. They'll shade. I think they had 2 or 3 different choices, product A, B, and C. One costs more than the other. And they'll come and do it all. They'll furnish
Yep.
the whole place. They'll manage it. So they're a great resource, 100%.
Yep, absolutely.
Let's see. I know that I'm looking at my notes. I know that people are going to want to know a little bit more about the fee structure with PadSplit. We all know it's kind of changed a little bit, but I think it's now kind of swung back to what it used to be-ish. Would you mind walking us through that, Audrey?
Yeah, absolutely. So our fee is this: any room that we lease up, we collect the 100% of the first 10 days of rent. Starting day 11, you're earning 92% rent. I underwrite at about, depends, 10% as like an annual average. And I have a nifty slide I'll show you that kind of,
That's easy
so
peasy.
you can visualize. So you're going to set a booking fee. Some people do, some people don't. Oh, by the way, top filters that people use when looking on PadSplit website. Number 1 is private bathrooms. Number 2 is pricing. So that's another thing. If you have your room priced at $200, you have to consider there is a transaction fee on top of that. It makes it about $206. A lot of people will filter to 200, right? And so your room is not being seen if that's the case. So keep that in mind. The third thing is booking fee. A lot of people don't want to pay the booking fee. So those are the top 3 filtered items on our website, but essentially you're setting up a booking fee. Most people set it between 50 and $100. Some people say, I don't want anyone living in my house that isn't willing to pay a booking fee. It means they don't have, any extra money. So I don't know, you operate this how you want. They move in 100% of the first 10 days. PadSplit collects. Starting day 11, again, we collect 8%. We also give you the opportunity to market your own rooms. I don't know if you guys know this, but within the dashboard, there's these flyers that you can pull. They have a QR code that's specific to you. We encourage hosts to list on Facebook Marketplace and Zillow. Any booking that comes through your QR code, we do not collect the first 10 days of rent. It's considered your booking. So day 1, we start collecting 8%. So why not throw it on there? Might as well. I had a guy onboard a 8-bedroom in Port Charlotte less than 30 days ago. It's our only property in Port Charlotte. Booked up in less than 30 days. 3 of the bookings came through his QR code. So.
And Audrey, earlier you mentioned you use the word if they're new and they don't commit to the 3 months, it's that 175 fee.
Mm-hmm.
Did you emphasize that purposely, like if they're new versus not new?
Yeah, exactly. Because the first host gets the 175. So they can commit to the 12 months to PadSplit, right? It's 2 PadSplit. The second host doesn't get anything, but they could stay for the remaining, they could stay forever. It just depends.
Was
Okay.
it 12,
that makes
12
sense.
months or 3 months? To be clear, 12
Sorry,
months?
12 weeks. 12 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Audrey, I want to touch really quick on HOAs. I know that there are people that do have co-living in areas with HOAs. I think maybe there's some PadSplit. What does PadSplit's stand on that? Will you take properties that have an HOA?
Yeah, we'll take a
Okay.
property that's an HOA. It's your, appetite for risk level.
Yeah.
I highly advise against it because the thing with HOAs is like they can change their rules on a dime. So
Yeah.
they might have, right now they might not have any rental restrictions, but if enough neighbors complain, they may change those bylaws. And now all of a sudden you have to convert the property. So
Yeah.
keep that in mind. But
Great.
I know in Orlando, like every property is in an HOA. So, they might collect $20 a month. That one I think, would be less of a risk than, you know, an HOA with a gated community, right?
Right. Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah,
I
I
made
think
it through my
Audrey,
list.
I think my last question then is, um, let's say there's like the extreme cases where someone's battling with the city. What are
I
some
knew this
ways
was
to,
coming, Dustin. I knew this was coming.
I had to.
We saved the
I mean,
best for last.
like we've fought with the city and it's going good. We're pretty much at the tail end of it all.
Okay.
But I'm curious, what typically provokes that and how can people avoid it?
Okay, so neighbors are the biggest factor, right? I don't know your specific situation. That's the thing. Every situation's different, right?
This
So
neighbor.
it was a neighbor. Guys, there's non-conforming use of homes all over the country, right? If you read the code in these, only family can live there, right? We are operating in a loophole. So the key is to maintain the house really well from the outside. That's number one. Make sure it's the most well-kept home in the neighborhood, right? That's one thing you can do. We just, again, in Atlanta, we had this guy come talk to us. He's a real estate agent. He's made his entire business around PadSplit, buys and sells PadSplit for people, for investors that want to get into it. He tells his investors, even if you don't need a permit, pull one so that it's in the window and you can be like, look, neighbors, I have my permit, you know, mind your business. We're doing permitted work here. That was his kind of suggestion. He says to always pull at least one permit. And then he says, you know, permit the whole floor plan, provide that to the city. If you're doing a big project, permit the whole floor plan, provided the city, instead of 8 bedrooms, you know, you have 4 bedrooms and 2 dens and an office. So that way you have those plans. I will say I've worked at PadSplit for a year. I think I've listed almost 100 properties so far, and not one has gotten a citation. So it's really rare. It's just about following the buy box. C-class neighborhoods work really well for us for a reason. You know, a neighborhood where there's a lot of rentals, a lot of cars parked along the streets, like those people don't care. But our CEO calls them NIMBYs. There's a lot of NIMBYs around that it's like they want to solve the affordable housing shortage, but just not in my backyard, right? I just don't want it in my neighborhood. So we gotta avoid that. But we have a whole team of attorneys on staff. All they do all day long is just make sure we're within our legal right to operate in the metros that we've launched in. And depending on the situation, in some instances, depending on what the citation says, you're gonna have full legal support from PadSplit. In some instances, you'll have minimal support, right? So it's really nuanced. It just depends. But we're not in the business to like incentivize you to acquire and put on our PadSplit and then leave you high and dry if you get a citation from the city. Just to be clear, you're always going to get a notice first. A lot of times those notices don't even turn into anything because code enforcement's so busy. If it does turn into a citation, email it to legal and we'll kind of guide you on where to go from there. But it's very nuanced. It depends. So what you guys need to do is be a good neighbor, pull permits. If you do that, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say our neighbor didn't like the parking, so we've kind of taken that into better consideration. But
Yeah,
it's gone well. It's basically resolved.
what I suggest doing is like if you do acquire in like a little bit nicer of a neighborhood and you're not close, as long as you're close to a bus stop, you can limit the parking and say, look, only 4 cars can park here. So after 4 cars are registered with my listing, no parking available. Everyone that books needs to, you know, be like someone that relies on public transportation, can't have a car. So that's one way to mitigate it. But yeah, parking is a big one.
Awesome. I think David has a question.
Yes. First off, Audrey, this has been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate everyone. Like, there's so many questions and
Yeah, it's
comments. I
awesome.
love the interaction. So this is wonderful. We strive to have this kind of interaction and collaboration on all of our calls. And so yeah,
Love to hear that.
I've heard people talk about PadSplit as more for transitional housing, where people kind of come and go and they're single people, and you try and reduce the interaction because, you don't have a living room in places
Right.
where people have conflict, versus a long-term rentals that are really designed to encourage that interaction and build long-term community, and therefore people stay a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
Can you provide some clarity and some, am I in the right, like, have I heard the right things? Is this accurate
Yeah. Well, sorry.
today? And is that also
What was
the
your
same
question? Is
moving
it
forward?
is it more transitional housing, or what was the question? Sorry.
Yeah, so PadSplit is it's really designed and set up to be more transitional housing, as opposed to provide housing where people are building community and relationships, and they're like, interaction is encouraged. Instead,
Mm-hmm.
interaction is actually discouraged by doing certain things, like
Mm-hmm.
no TV, no living room, no.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is like, yeah, it could be considered transitional housing, but we're seeing people stay a lot longer than we even anticipated that they would, right? And so we don't want to create spaces within the property for them to hang out and congregate, because you have to remember these people aren't friends, they're not family, don't know each other. And so we want to create space for them to have a safe place that's quiet, that they can come home and rest their head after a long day of work, right? So we don't want to turn those, if we're not converting the living room, we don't want to outfit the living room with couches and televisions and things like that. But what we found is if you create those spaces within the bedrooms, it becomes more of a long-term stay. And that's just fact. That's just what's happened. So if you're willing to go the extra mile and put a little extra effort into creating those spaces within the bedrooms, it will pay off.
And so you actually like the idea of mounting a TV, and like the house comes with a TV. Every room comes with the TV and the remote,
Yep.
and the
I
TV, I guess it would be like it would pull off the Wi-Fi, and then people have to have their own Netflix or whatever service. Is that typically how you do it?
No, I would just provide internet for the house, and then they can buy their own services. But another thing we're seeing is like desks in the room. I am very nosy and I love to read through all of my listings. And I actually kind of help my investors onboard for the first month. I'm kind of digging in, and it's amazing. Like, people want a desk. They really want a desk. If you think about it, unless they're cooking meal or sitting down at the counter or kitchen table, there's really nowhere else to sit. We have a lot of nighttime students. We have a lot of like part-time customer service type roles. So creating space for them to have a quiet sit down in their room is huge. Those desks are like $50. Why wouldn't you? You know? Another thing is people have started to create little sitting areas within the bedrooms. Find a cheap chair on Marketplace where they can kind of kick their feet up. And so those things go a really long way. If anyone's interested, I can pull some successful listings that have seen really long tenure and just send them to you so you can see how the rooms have been set up, and you can literally mimic what they've done. It's nothing special, right? Amenities like pools, jacuzzis, things like that, they're not big selling points. What are those little things that I talked about in the bedroom, inside the bedrooms? So amenities like that go a long way. Many fridges, yes. We don't want them cooking in their room, so I try to steer people away from like buying microwaves and things like that for the room. But yes, mini fridges have become a big amenity because people can store their food, their medications, things like that in their personal fridge.
Thank you. I want to turn it over to Catherine. We've got about 3 minutes left. And we can stay a couple extra minutes if people want to stay extra, but.
Yeah, I know maybe this is a quick question. If not, do you stop people or give any kind of warning to buyers who are looking in cities that have active litigation against PadSplit, or they're actively coming after PadSplit properties, so that people don't invest in those locations? Is there anything like that?
So we have never lost a lawsuit. I will say that. Our legal strategy works very well for us, but however, there are some that make it more difficult to operate in than others. And yes, I would definitely steer you away from those. It's places like Winter Park, Florida. right? If the address is not Orlando, don't buy there. Right?
Yeah,
So
I was just
smaller,
thinking of like,
These-
I know Fort Worth is actively
Fort
like
Worth,
on when they shut down the properties, they actively will specifically say PadSplit.
yeah,
So
Fort
then
Worth
you
is
lose the income. That was what I
Fort,
was thinking of. Then your property gets shut down.
Fort Worth is becoming difficult. I know we're active with them right now. There's been tons of comms around Fort Worth specifically. I don't think we're worried. I think eventually we will win that lawsuit. It's going to take a little bit, but
I just
yeah,
still see people listing those for sale. And, like that's my concern is someone who doesn't know that, then they buy it and then they don't realize they can't actually operate it the way they think they can operate it.
totally.
So,
There's an AE in that covers Fort Worth, Dallas, and I know he's in communication with them around, hey, steer clear of here. Ideally, an investor's working with an account executive that will steer them in the right direction.
Can I ask one more question? It's about charging an opportunity for us to make more money, but provide more value. So for example, I have cleaners clean the general area, but not the room specifically. But if I wanted to offer that to my guests, is there a way to use
Yeah.
PadSplit to charge for that? Or do I have to
Yeah,
call it
so
separately?
you can, if you want to offer cleaners monthly, include it in the listing, right? So specify that in the listing.
Okay.
Once a month, I'm going to have someone clean. Let me know if you want that or not. If you do, I'll increase your monthly rent $10, right? So you can definitely have those conversations. Or if you say somebody is coming monthly and include it in your rate.
and then PadSplit would get their 8% of that, or fees are
Yeah.
separate.
Every dollar collected, we get 8%.
And then are there other ways that hosts are collecting additional money? Like obviously rent a storage closet, rent the garage, things like that. And have you heard about any success stories in
We don't have
increasing?
that. We don't have that option to like set that up within our dashboard. And technically you're not supposed to collect money outside of the platform, but we do have some hosts that collect like deposits outside of the platform. And we allow that. I don't know if I would necessarily do that or not, but we don't have, we don't have that set up. Sorry. Maybe one day in the
Yeah, I got a lot of future ideas. But yeah, like
I do. I love it.
the garage is for rent. Check the box if you want to rent it. But yeah, happy to push it through PadSplit. And obviously I'd want to maintain it that way because it'd just be easier, right? Codes on the garage, codes on the storage closet because somebody's got a lot of stuff or whatever, bikes
Are
and
you part of the Facebook group by chance?
yeah, I am. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So our CEO is in there and people kind of fire off ideas and we have implemented a lot of them. So definitely if anyone has any suggestions, like we are growing and learning every day, right? And so the hosts really kind of lead the pack and how we operate. So definitely fire away any suggestions. If enough people jump on it, we'll implement it.
Audrey, thank you so much. This has been amazing.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Your questions were great. Happy to come back anytime.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Audrey. Can you show your contact info one last time?
Yeah, let me see if I can grab that quickly. Sorry, I have 1,000 tabs open. How do you want me just to drop it in the chat?
If you want to show it on here and drop it, that'd be perfect.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I promise I'm almost there.
While Audrey's doing that, is there anyone that wants to lead next week? This call.
I think Melanie does.
Sure, I'll do it. Thursday? Yep.
Yeah, I'd love to hear how you filled the Kylene.
Yeah, I'll definitely talk about operations because it's been some interesting things have happened in the short amount of time.
Amazing. Thank you.
Guys, reach out to me and I'll send you my calendar link and we can set up a one-on-one call for anyone considering PadSplit.
Awesome. Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Okay. See you guys next week.